Okay, on to wastewater. Another viable supply, a recycled supply where we can get multiple uses out of water. When we think of wastewater, oftentimes in this part of the country, it's out of processing plants, food processing plants. They use a lot of water making French fries or frozen vegetables or whatever that product might be. It takes an awful lot of water to go through the cleaning process of that product and also to transport it through those plants, and so there's an awful lot of residual water comes out the backside of the process. And it's not that it's necessarily poor quality water, it just may have some particulates in it that need to be filtered out. Oftentimes we run that water into a lagoon, use it as a settling basin, let the big particles settle out, and then go ahead and pump it and irrigate with it. It's a very common way to handle it. Also, wastewater can be from municipalities. That sounds just a little more gross, you know, pumping sewerage water onto crops that you might eventually eat. But they put the water through a complete biological bacterial breakdown before that water comes out the other end to be used as wastewater for irrigation. So they've gone through a tertiary treatment and has been purified from any of the bad bacterial impacts that are in it. You do have to be concerned about a couple of things. You have to be concerned about heavy metals and salts that might come through that water. And you also have to be concerned about bacteria. So there's three critters out there that we really have to be a little worried about. And that water needs to be tested. Particularly in some cases where they're using water in mining. And that is a huge problem in mining, where a lot of heavy metals end up going downstream out of the tailings of the ore and so on. A huge study is going on right now in the Coeur d'Alene River Basin. They're just having a regular snit fit up there about the water quality coming into Lake Coeur d'Alene from those mines that had been operating for years and years, and now as it rains and water percolates down through those tailings, they're getting heavy metals showing up in the streams coming off of the downstream side of those mines. And so they're really monitoring that real carefully. You know, we've kind of broken the actual natural structure of the land and have exposed an awful lot of those heavy metals getting into the water, and those heavy metals are absorbed by the little critters, and then the bigger critters eat them, and the bigger critters eat the littler critters, and eventually we end up eating something in that food chain. And so we're going to end up with when we talk heavy metals, we're talking mercury, lead, arsenic, selenium, those kinds of things. And too much of any of those in any organism will make them very sick or even kill them. And plants will absorb those heavy metals also. They'll take them up into themselves, and then the cattle, for example, you grow forages, it absorbs into the forages, so you get a bunch of mercury absorbed into the forage, then you feed it to the cattle, and then you milk the cattle and you drink the milk, and then all of a sudden you have the mercury's gone all the way through that, all those processes, and you end up getting mercury poisoning from the milk. And in the meantime, the cow got sick, the plants weren't real healthy, and so on. But it affects everything right along the way. So we really have to be concerned about quality in wastewater and make sure that it is tested for that quality. In food processing, another thing, we can get a lot of salt in the process. As you know, when you buy canned vegetables in the store, very high sodium content in a canned vegetable. Well, some of that sodium ends up going out the wastewater. And so we've added salts to the wastewater. Now what we're doing is contaminating the ground with salts potentially. So we have to make sure we're not doing that in the process. And then the bacteria counts have to be monitored. And you know, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of bacteria that gets pumped out on the ground. You go to a feedlot, to a dairy, where they wash all that waste into a lagoon, and they will pump raw lagoon water right out on the field. And they have those slurry shooters, and I mean, it's brown water they're putting out there. One thing, it smells real bad, and another thing, it does have a lot of bacteria in it. Some of it's going to be bad bacteria, like coliform bacteria. Now the ground will break it down, but you have to be careful if you're going to be harvesting a crop off of that ground. There's time frames that you have to wait before you can go in and harvest after you've applied that wastewater. So there are some considerations always when we're dealing with surface wastewater in that regard.